Okay, AP Psych friends, our final video for Unit 10 on personality. This is just kind of a wrap up of the entire unit, just in exploring the self, and then a little mention here of culture and its impact on personality, which I claim could possibly be considered a fifth approach to explanations of personality. Okay, so when exploring the self, it's kind of interesting to think about, culturally, the fact that, personality, studies or exploring personality in an intro to psychology class is, not necessarily something that would be as important in other cultures as it is in ours. But nevertheless, we like talking about ourselves, right? Like, who am I, right? That the self is the organizer of our thoughts, our feelings, our actions, right? It's the center of who we are. It's the center of our personality. And that makes, a unit like Unit 10, kind of interesting in that we get to, as we learn about all of these theories, think about, how they apply to our own personalities and to our own self. Some interesting things to mention here, and a lot of this we'll revisit when we get to Unit 14 on social psychology, but it's worth mentioning now. Okay, even though we've been obsessing over Unit 10 and personality and exploring our own personalities through personality tests, one of the things that is good and humbling, it's good to keep in mind, is this concept known as the spotlight effect. Okay, and the spotlight effect is basically saying that we become so obsessed with the concept of self that we think way more people are paying attention to us than really are, right? And so, we focus so much on ourselves that we kind of just assume that everybody else is doing the same. And that's one kind of nice, humbling thing to keep in mind, right? As you obsess over what outfit to wear to school tomorrow. And that, hey, everybody's so busy obsessing over their own self that we're paying way less attention to the people around us than we think they're paying attention to us. And so, right, it's like we're each standing in this own spotlight, and we think that everybody's watching us, but really that's just not the case at all. Everybody's kind of worried about themselves versus, worried about what you are doing. And so, I don't know if that's good or bad, but I personally view that as somewhat refreshing, right? That, less people are casting, a watchful eye towards me than it feels like. Self-esteem would kind of be viewed as our self-worth, right? And it's important to have, good self-esteem about, the value of, yourself as an individual. But that does not necessarily mean that just a general promoting of self-esteem is good. And that's one of the things that, I strongly encourage all of you, as future teachers or future parents, to be, weary of, and that, it'd probably be more important for us to encourage high self-efficacy expectations for younger children, in that, presenting them with challenging situations, but, telling them that, look, we know that you can do it, right? That you have the ability to solve these challenges on your own, right? So when you think high self-efficacy expectations, think the little engine that could, right? I think I can, versus a general, just that, self-esteem boosting, like, hey, everybody's special, right? Everybody's good, everybody's great. It kind of devalues the meaning of it, and it really can lead to the third bullet there on the screen, self-serving bias, right? And that too much talk up of self-esteem, right, can lead to self-serving bias. What is self-serving bias, right? That's just, looking at yourself in a more favorable light than you look at other people. And so, as a teacher, my favorite example of this is, I have yet to have a student in all of my years of teaching thank me for giving them an A, right? But I've had plenty of students in my tenure as an educator curse me for giving them an F. Well, you see the difference there, right? People take credit for their successes, but not for their failures, right? When something good happens, it's, oh, due to our own individual merits and hard work. But when bad things happen, when we mess up, well, that's everybody else's fault but our own, right? Most individuals believe themselves to be better than average, right? So we tend to look at ourselves in a more favorable light than we do other people. Okay. And so, that's just something important to keep in mind. Like we worry so much in our culture about hurting people's feelings, but honestly, encouraging people to feel good about themselves when they haven't earned it is bad, right? It can lead to conceited, self-important individuals, right, that kind of turn nasty towards those who try to like puncture their bubble, right? And so, like, without me going on some sort of tirade, there's, I'm not, this idea is obviously not unique to me, right? It's social psychology at work, and plenty of authors have talked about this, right? This whole everybody gets a trophy, everybody wins mentality, leading to people like being nasty towards anybody that tries to give them like healthy, constructive criticism. Okay, and so we need to watch for that in our culture. Now, obviously, are there individuals that have like legitimate low self-esteem? Well, sure there are, but the vast majority of individuals, I would say, and psychology says this too. It's not just me, but psychology would say it's more of a self-serving bias, and that lots of times you hear people make disparaging statements about themselves, like, I'm so fat, I'm so ugly, I didn't do this right, I messed this up. But usually people are making those statements out loud in an attempt to have people validate them with loving statements, in an attempt to make themselves feel good. And so the majority of the time we do view ourselves in a more favorable light. Okay, so that's just kind of this interesting wrap up of, the self, and why Unit 10 on personality is usually so fascinating for people. It's just interesting to explore, our own self concept. The last thing to mention here, remember fifth approach question mark. The book by no means labels this as the fifth approach to personality, but it's kind of an interesting thing to look at. It is concerning like how your culture has shaped who you are as an individual. And so the easiest way to look at this, and remember this from 40 studies as well, is to look at the difference between an individualist versus a collectivist culture. And so obviously, we live in an individualist culture that, puts a heavy focus on the individual and the self, versus a collectivist culture putting more of an emphasis on your identity or your personality within a socially constructed group, such as your grade level or your family. And so obviously our culture is individualist, as evidenced by anytime I pass back a test in class, people ask their classmates, hey, what did you get on the test? You're not asking because you are genuinely concerned for the welfare of the group as a whole. You most certainly just want to know where you rank. And so if you maybe did a little poorly, right, self-serving bias, hey, I didn't do as bad as that guy, right, sitting next to me. That clearly shows that we live in an individualist culture. And so again, this whole section it will be revisited in our Unit 14 on social psych, but it's just kind of an interesting wrap up to this whole discussion of personality. And so, yay, we've made it through Unit 10. Bring any questions you have with you to class, and as always, thank you for listening.